you ready?
Yes, I am.
We
Thank
may,
you, Chair.
you may proceed.
Mr. van der Westhuizen, before the adjournment, you were informing the Chair about an entity called Hammocks. It was your evidence that during your time at Transnet, you had not encountered the entity called Hammocks at all. Is that correct?
That's correct, Chair.
If I can take you to Exhibit Bundle BB7B and ask you to please turn to page 519. Before you, Mr. van der Westhuizen, is a letter on what appears to be a Hammocks letterhead, and the letter is dated 12 December 2014. It is addressed by Mr. Khan of Hammocks to Mr. Sunil Joshi, who is represented as the MD and CEO of Neotel Pty Ltd. For the record, this particular letter states the following in paragraph 1. This letter serves to confirm today's engagement with Neotel pertaining to their master services agreement and the related assets negotiation with Transnet SABC. The talks have reached an impasse, and Neotel wishes to engage the services of Hammocks to analyze both entities' requirements to find a workable solution. The work is to be carried out on a pure risk basis, and Hammocks shall not bill for any time and material, nor any out-of-pocket expense. If successful, Neotel shall pay Hammocks 1. For the asset sale, a full and final once-off fee. It's written actually once off, presumably a spelling error. Once-off fee of 25 million rand, payable 30 days after signature. 2. For the master services agreement, a fee of 2% of the value of the contract, currently at 1.8 billion rand. And 3. These fees are excluding VAT. These fees are success fee commissions payable because of the assistance and expertise provided by Hammocks, enabling Neotel to close these two deals that are currently agreed to business as confirmed by both Neotel and Transnet. And the last paragraph, please concur the above together with the success fee structure where the latter shall become binding on Neotel. Is it correct that this particular letter deals with the very 2014 MSA and buyback agreement that you were integrally involved in?
It does, Chair.
And by the date of this letter, which is 12 December 2014, how does that date compare to the meeting that you had at the Neotel offices at which the final MSA agreement was presented for signature?
Chair, so this letter was issued, it appears, the day before we finalized the master services agreement, and I supplied that document to Mr. Singh.
And notwithstanding what is stated in this letter, did you have any engagement with a company called Hammocks in relation to Neotel?
None whatsoever, Chair.
Do you know whether anybody from Transnet was in any way engaged with this entity
Not to my knowledge,
around that
Chair.
time?
No, not to my knowledge.
Okay. What are the chances that you would have known if there had been anybody of significance in terms of position who would have been engaged?
Chair, I think the chances would have been fairly good since I led this process.
Yes.
And there's a couple of items that's peculiar in this document. Like I said, number one, the date.
Yes.
That's the day before. So I question what value they could have added in a day.
Yes.
The second item is that they mentioned that the talks reached an impasse, and further in the document they state both parties confirmed lost business. I mean, I think we've gone through the detail. There is absolutely no way that Transit would not have signed this master services agreement
Yes.
because we didn't have an alternative.
Yes.
So I question who at Transit would have given that message that we've reached an impasse and we can't go any further. So that I also find quite peculiar. Yeah, and then the fees are for a day's worth of work is quite exorbitant, yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
Can I then ask you to turn to page 494 of the same bundle, please? Do you have any personal knowledge of this document?
I didn't, Chair, until the investigator supplied me with the document.
Please identify this document, the nature of this document.
Chair, it appears to be a contract between Neotel and Hammocks for the supply of certain consulting services.
Okay. If I can ask you to turn to the next page, which is page 495, is it correct that at paragraph 1.2.4, the commencement date, which would be the commencement date of this particular agreement, means 12 December 2014?
That's correct, Chair.
And is it correct that that is the same date of the document we've just previously referred to, which was the Hammocks letter to Mr. Sunil Joshi?
That's correct. It's the same date.
If I can then ask you to turn to page 496, at which paragraph 4 documents consultancy services. As a short paragraph, the 4.1 reads that the consultant undertakes to facilitate the successful conclusion of the asset sale referred to in the Master Services Agreement concluded between Neotel and Transnet SOC Limited. 4.2. For the purposes of this agreement, customer means Transnet SOC Limited. Project means the successful conclusion and signature of the asset sale forming part of the MSA concluded between Neotel and Transnet SOC Limited. And on the next page, Neotel representative means Francois van der Merwe. Do you have any observation that you can make in relation to the services that were contracted in this agreement?
The agreement seems to be a repetition pretty much of that letter. So my commentary would be very similar, Chair, that an agreement signed between the parties on 12 December to get to Transit and Neotel to agree to a 1.8 billion rand contract that we've been negotiating for months on end. I fail to understand what value Hammocks could possibly have added.
The word asset sale in paragraph 4.1 on page 496 of this document, in your understanding, what would asset sale refer to?
Chair, in my understanding, it would refer to the buyback of assets that we've discussed at length this morning as well.
And that's the very buyback, the asset buyback, sorry, which formed part of the 2014 MSA agreement that you were involved in negotiating.
That's correct.
If I can then take you to page 497, paragraph 6. Paragraph 6.1 documents the detail of, not 6.1, sorry, paragraph 6 documents the detail of fees that would be payable in relation to the services that are contracted under this agreement. To understand the depth of the consequence of this agreement, it is necessary that we deal with the detail of fees that were in fact contracted under this agreement. At paragraph 6.1.1, it records that for the successful implementation and finalization of an operational agreement relating to the future maintenance, insurance, and operating of the assets bought by Transnet from Neotel, a full and once-off fee of 25 million rand, payable 30 days after signature of the operational agreement between Neotel and Transnet SOC Limited, currently anticipated for 18 March 2015 or any other later date agreed by the Neotel and Transnet SOC Limited. The fees contemplated in 6.1 above are excluding VAT. If we can pause there for a second. Are you aware of what operational agreement between Neotel and Transnet is referred to in the paragraph that has just been read?
Chair, my only assumption can be that it has to be the master services agreement between Transnet and Neotel.
And the 25 million rand that is the once-off fee is once again consistent with the letter of Hammocks sent to Mr. Sunil Joshi dated 12 December 2014. Is that correct?
It appears that way, Chair, yes.
At paragraph 6.3 on page 498, the agreement according to this contract continues to record that clause 6 is towards the, let me just read the full one. Notably, the fees referred to above in this clause 6 is success fee commission payable because of the assistance and expertise provided by consultant enabling Neotel to successfully close the project, which project is currently agreed to be lost business as confirmed by both Neotel and Transnet SOC Limited. Can you please...
I'm trying to look where you are reading at page 498.
At paragraph 6.3, Chair.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Do you have any comment to that, Mr. van der Westhuizen?
Chair, again, I would like to understand who from Transnet they would have engaged, because they do state that we concurred that this was lost business, and like I've stated before, Transnet did not have an option but to contract with Neotel at this stage.
But did you already say that to the extent that they, and now I'm talking about Hammocks, talk about a business that was lost, that this was a lost business as confirmed by both Neotel and Transnet SOC Limited. What's your comment on the concept of a lost business, number one? Number two, the question of whether this had been confirmed to be the position by Transnet as well.
Chair, so it appears that these documents relate to the master services agreement and the asset buyback between Transnet and Neotel. Now, I mean, lost business in my mind would imply that the parties are not able to reach agreement, and both parties have confirmed we're not going to get there.
Yes.
We're going to walk away.
Yes.
That's lost business,
Yeah.
at least my interpretation thereof.
Yes.
Like I've articulated before, that was not an option for Transnet. We couldn't. We were fully dependent. We were a captive client.
Yes.
So that's why it's also strange. I think they're taking a bit of poetic license here, to be blunt, in stating that this was confirmed by both Neotel and Transnet. Like I said, it would be nonsensical for anyone from Transnet to confirm that this is lost business.
So, is your evidence that, one, you never had any engagement with Hammocks and therefore never said to them this was lost business? Two, you don't believe anybody from Transnet could genuinely have said this was a lost business in the light of what you have already said, namely Transnet could not afford not to reach agreement with Neotel on this issue, as I understand your evidence, because of the consequences that would follow. Three, even if there was somebody from Transnet who, unbeknown to you, said to Hammocks, this is lost business, do you say that they could not have believed that to be true?
Chair, I would say correct on all 3 points, yes.
Yes, okay, thank you.
Important to the date that's mentioned in the next subparagraph, 6.4, reads that for the avoidance of doubt whatsoever, satisfactory performance of the consultancy services shall be evidenced by the following. 6.4.1, successful conclusion and signature of an agreement giving effect to the sale of assets as contemplated in the Master Services Agreement concluded between Neotel and Transnet SOC on or before 19 December 2014, and 6.4.2, confirmation and agreement of related asset sale and the conclusion of an operational agreement in this regard by no later than 18 March 2015. Are you aware of when the MSA was finally signed?
I am, Chair. The final Master Services Agreement was signed by Transnet on the 15th of December 2014 and countersigned by Neotel on the 19th of December 2014.
Was it 15 December 2014 for Transnet and 19 for Neotel, 19 December 2014?
That's correct, Chair.
Okay.
In effect, the successful conclusion is relative to the date of the MSA, which was in fact finally signed on the 19th of December 2014.
That's correct, Chair.
And if I could then ask you...
I'm sorry. I'm looking for Transnet signature. I see Neotel's one at 504. Is that the right page for that?
No, Chair. This
It's
is an
not.
agreement between Neotel and Hammocks.
Oh yeah, but I'm having in mind both. This agreement relates to the one that he's talking about.
Yes.
Okay, so the other one was signed on different dates by Transnet and Neotel. Transnet 14 December 2014, Neotel 19 December 2014. Then that's what you will still be coming to in due course, this one.
Now
Okay.
may be a prudent time to
Yeah.
hand up the
Okay.
MSA that was concluded. Can I just get that, please?
But the one that for Transnet and Neotel is are you going to that one, or have we dealt with that one? For
Between-
Transnet and Neotel. The
That is the
That's
agreement
what
I'm
you are
wanting
coming
to hand up now.
Okay.
In fact, Chair, this is actually a supplementary statement which accounts for different errors in the original statement, but importantly it attaches a copy of the 2014 MSA agreement that this witness is now referring to.
The lever arch file containing the supplementary statement of Mr. Van der Westhuizen, the witness currently on the witness stand, will be marked Exhibit BP7C.
As it pleases, Chair.
Thank you.
In answer to your question, Chair, If we could turn to page 178 of the bundle, and a copy will be handed to the witness now. Thank you.
170?
178.
Yes.
Mr. van der Westhuizen, through you, this is in fact the signature page for the 2014 MSA and buyback agreement.
That's correct, Chair.
And are these the dates that you informed in your evidence, which was that Transnet signed this agreement on the 15th of December 2014, and the 19th of December 2014, this agreement was signed by Neotel?
That's correct.
I think when I was clarifying the dates with you, I said 14 December. I see here it's 15 December, so you might not have heard that I got the date wrong.
Yeah, I thought you said 15th December, Chair. Yes, it's the 15th.
Okay, so the correct date is 15.
That's correct, Chair.
Yeah.
If we can then, while still in this supplementary bundle, if I could ask you to go to page 56. Paragraph 25. Is it correct that this agreement regulates at least the asset take-back, which we've been referring to as the asset buyback?
It does, Chair.
And so, in effect, on the very day that the MSA was signed by the contracting parties of Transnet and Neotel, this very agreement between Hammocks and Neotel was similarly signed. No, I'm getting my dates wrong.
Yes, so, Chair, I think one of the
Sorry,
success
it's 2015.
factors
Yeah.
refers to
Sorry,
the
I'm
same
getting my
date,
dates
yes.
wrong.
Yes, I think you
Sorry.
want to say, is it correct that on the day on which one of the parties, or rather Neotel, signed the master services agreement with Transnet, namely the 19th of December, is the same day on which it signed an agreement with Hammocks? If you look at the other agreement
Chair, I
of
think
Hammocks, or did I mix something? Did I mix up something as well? Didn't
Chair,
Hammocks? I'm sorry. Didn't Hammocks and Neotel, or rather, didn't one of the parties between Hammocks and Neotel sign the agreement between Hammocks and Neotel on the 19th of December 2014?
Chair, no, so the correspondence between them, the letter and the document, if I'm not mistaken, was on the 12th of December, the day before we finalized the master services agreement. It's peculiar that the success factor in this document between them refers exactly to the date when the MSA was actually signed. And I think we'll get to it in a second, but this document was actually signed, the contract between Neotel and Hammocks was actually signed in February of 2015, a month or two after the conclusion of the MSA, but the commencement date in the agreement is 12 December 2014.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah, take it further.
So in the result, the very agreement between Hammocks and Neotel was signed long after the MSA that agreement sought to regulate was in fact signed.
That's correct, Chair.
Okay.
Just want to make sure that I've got this. Now, the agreement between Hammocks and Neotel is at 494, is that right?
The first agreement, Chair. The first agreement.
The first, well, that's,
We'll still get to the next
oh, that's
one.
19 February, not 19 December.
Yes.
So it's about 2 months later.
That's correct, Chair.
Oh, that's the point you were making.
That's true.
For some reason, I thought that it was 19 December. And then if you go back to that letter of 12 December, or before we go there, is there a clause that they put in this agreement between Neotel and Hammocks to the, okay, let me see. Oh, yeah, this is the date. This is what I'm looking for. I think you did refer to it earlier on, namely clause 1.2.4, the commencement date,
Yes, Chair.
which says the commencement date is 12 December 2014, notwithstanding the date that this agreement is signed by the party signing last in time.
Yes, Chair.
So they are effectively saying we may not have had an agreement on the 12th of December, but as long as there is a signature of the agreement that happens later, you must treat us as if we did have an agreement on the 12th of December.
That's what it appears like,
Yeah.
Chair, yes.
Okay. And that letter of the 12th of December, where
That's
was
page 159.
it? 159.
I mean, sorry, 519. Sorry.
519. Just want to. Yeah, okay.
If we could then look at same bundle, which is BB7B, and turn to page 507. Are you there, Mr. van der Westhuizen?
I am, Chair.
This document appears to be another new business consultancy agreement between Neotel, Pty Ltd, and Hammocks, Pty Ltd. Is that correct?
That's correct, Chair.
Do you once again have any personal knowledge of this document?
Chair, the first time I became aware of this document was when the investigators shared it with me.
If I can ask you to turn to page 517 of the same bundle. It's the signature page. Whilst there's no date for the signature of Hammocks, the date that appears for the signature of Neotel is once again 19 February 2015. Is that correct?
That's correct, Chair.
And then if I could ask you to go to page 508. And once again, at paragraph 1.2.4, the commencement date of this agreement is recorded as 12 December 2014, which is no different to the previous agreement.
Correct.
Did the first agreement between Neotel and Hammocks have the signature of Hammocks? What page was it again?
Page 504. Hammocks certainly signed the agreement.
Both parties signed.
Yes, Chair, but Hammocks did not inform of the date of signature.
The date wasn't included, so in both agreements there was no date of signature. But
Yes, Chair.
are the two documents different?
Yes, Chair.
Oh, okay. But do they have the same date for Neotel for signature?
Yes, Chair.
Oh,
There were two agreements that appear to have been signed
On
on
this-
exactly the same date,
day, yeah.
at least by Neotel.
yeah.
And
yeah.
that was the 19th of February 2015.
Yes, okay.
The services I ever contracted were somewhat different.
The services?
Yes, Chair.
Oh, okay.
And so, to that end, if I could ask you to go to page 509, please, Mr. van der Westhuizen. At paragraph 4, the consultancy services are recorded to be that the consultant agrees to undertake to analyze the requirements of both Neotel and Transnet SOC to find a workable solution to the impasse in negotiations between Neotel and Transnet SOC in regard to their master services agreement. What are your observations in relation to the difference between the consultancy services contracted under this agreement and the previous agreement that we just referred to earlier between Hammocks and Neotel?
Chair, it appears as if the first contract that we looked at earlier relates to consulting services for the asset buyback, whereas it appears the second agreement relates to the conclusion of the master services agreement between Transnet and Neotel.
And to that end, on page 510, project is defined at paragraph B at the very top of the page to mean the successful conclusion and signature of the asset sale forming part of the MSA concluded between Neotel and Transnet SOC Limited.
That's correct.
The other fundamental difference is that which relates to fees. To this end, can I ask you to go to page 511, paragraph 6. It's recorded at paragraph 6.1 that for satisfactory performance of the consultancy services in accordance with the terms and conditions of the agreement, Neotel shall pay to the consultant the fees as follows. 6.1.1 for the successful conclusion and signature of the master services agreement, a fee of 2% of the value of the contract, which is currently at 1.8 billion rand. 6.1.2, the fees contemplated in 6.1 above are excluding VAT. 6.2 reads that the work is to be carried out on a pure risk basis, and the consultant shall not bill for any time and material, nor any out-of-pocket expenses. What is highlighted of note in italics is at paragraph 6.3, which informs that notably the fees referred to above in clause 6 is success fee commission payable because of the assistance and expertise provided by consultant enabling Neotel to successfully close the master services agreement currently agreed to be lost business as confirmed by both Neotel and Transnet SOC Limited. For the avoidance of any doubt whatsoever, satisfactory performance of the consultancy services shall be evidenced in the successful conclusion and signature of the master services agreement between Neotel and Transnet SOC. How many master services agreements were concluded between Neotel and Transnet?
Just the one, Chair.
So he's reference to master services agreement in this paragraph any different to the master services agreement that may have been contemplated under the first Hammocks agreement?
It doesn't appear that way, Chair.
So you are able to say that without any shadow of doubt, anybody who says there was a stalemate reached or deadlock between Neotel and Transnet with regard to in the negotiations relating to this agreement cannot be talking the truth.
Chair, yes, we had a stalemate where we disagreed on certain terms,
Yeah,
but not to the extent that I believe either party would have walked away from this agreement.
yes.
Neotel was reliant on the revenue from Transnet,
Yes.
and Transnet was reliant on Neotel because they owned our assets.
Yes, but what you are able to say for sure is that, one, you were not contacted in any way and you did not have any communication of any kind with Hammocks.
Yes, Chair, I did not.
And from the people that you knew at Transnet to be involved in these negotiations, there is not a single person that you know to have been contacted by Hammocks or to have had any contact with them. Not to say that you are sure that nobody was in contact with them, but you don't have any such knowledge.
That's correct, Chair.
And it would be strange, as far as you are concerned, if somebody within Transnet who was in the negotiation team had had such contact with Hammocks without you being aware or being informed in the light of the role you were playing in the negotiations.
Absolutely, Chair.
Okay.
Is it correct then, Mr. van der Westhuizen, that according to paragraph B on page 510, this particular agreement includes both the asset buyback and the MSA?
It does appear that way, Chair, yes.
Okay. Do you know what 2% of 1.8 billion calculates to?
I believe it calculates to 36 billion rand, Chair.
To that end, could I ask you to then turn to page 505 of the same bundle? What appears before you, Mr. van der Westhuizen, is what appears to be a tax invoice by Hammocks to Neotel, dated 2 January 2015, and the description for this invoice is for Master Services Agreement Successful Conclusion Success Fee, the total being 36 million rand, which together with VAT of 5,040,000 totals 41,040,000 rand. Is that correct?
That's correct.
You said that the 2% of 1.8 billion calculates to what figure?
I think it's 36 million rand, Chair.
And so that figure would accord with this amount that has been invoiced.
Yes.
Importantly, it is highlighted that the date of this invoice is the 2nd of January 2015. Is that correct?
That is correct, Chair.
And so the date of invoice precedes the date of the conclusion, or rather the signature of the Hammocks, of both Hammocks agreements.
That's correct, as those dates were 19 Feb 2015.
So to summarize, You have a meeting, or rather you attend a meeting on the 13th of December 2014, at which you present the final draft of the 2014 MSA and buyback agreement for signature.
That's correct, Chair.
And that's a meeting that is held at Neotel's offices.
That's correct.
Unbeknown to you, there is a letter dated the 12th of December 2014 by Hammocks to Neotel, which informs that they are going to assist in finalizing the very process that you were involved in to finalize on presentation of a final MSA the day after.
That's correct, Chair.
According to the date sequence, it was also then that on the 12th of December 2014, the very agreements that were signed on the 19th of February 2015 between Hammocks and Neotel was agreed to come into effect. That being the day before you have this agreement at which you present the final MSA agreement for signature.
That's correct, Chair.
On the 15th of December 2014, Transnet signs the 2014 MSA and buyback agreement, which is then countersigned by Neotel on the 19th of December 2014.
Correct.
On the 2nd of February 2015, an invoice is issued by Hammocks to Neotel for the sum of 36 million rand, which is in line with the letter that's dated the 12th of December, and a subsequent agreement that was concluded on the 19th of February 2015 between Hammocks and Neotel.
Just one correction, Advocate. I think you said the 2nd of Feb. I think it's the 2nd of Jan you meant.
Oops.
But yes, correct in everything
Thank
else.
you for the correction.
Sure.
The 2nd of January.
Yes.
And then it was only more than a month later, on the 19th of February 2015, that these agreements between Hammocks and Neotel, the one which appears to regulate just the asset buyback, the other one which appears to regulate both the MSA and the asset buyback, are signed off by both Neotel and Hammocks.
That's incorrect, Chair.
Who were in your in the Transnet negotiating team that you were leading? I take it you were the leader of the negotiation team.
Yes, Chair. So there were multiple people included in that team.
Yeah.
Transnet procurement, Transnet supply development, external legal, internal legal.
I just want the names as well, if you are able to remember.
Sure, there's quite a few people, Chair. It was more than 10 from what I recall.
Is that so?
Yes.
But you can remember some names and
Yes,
not
yes,
others?
yes, Chair. Yeah, no, so I can remember. I
Okay,
think,
mention those that you remember in their positions if you are able to.
okay, so Chair, you just want to double check, you specifically referring to the commercial stream and who was part of those negotiations?
The negotiations relating to this agreement.
Yes, so there were
Yes.
two teams, the commercial team and the
Oh,
technical
yes,
team.
yes.
So
And
the
you were on the commercial one?
That's correct, Chair.
Yes.
So it was myself, it was a gentleman by the name of MacDonald Maluleke in Transit Procurement, Belfry from, his surname escapes me, but Belfry from Supply Development. The external legal was Basetsane Monobatsi. The internal legal, his name escapes me now as well. There was an external consultant, Bruce McLaren. There was Jack Matthews from Gartner. There was, I think, Clara from Neotel, their legal representative. There was a gentleman by the name of Albert Kadri from Neotel again. François van der Merwe from Neotel. And that's who I can remember.
Yeah, okay, no, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay.
And you confirm that all those that you have mentioned and those whose names you can't remember, no one of them ever mentioned to you having had any contact with Hammocks.
I can confirm that, Chair.
Thank you.
Just to close the timeline sequence, to the extent that 36 million rand was paid for services contracted on the 12th of February, in relation to services that you finalized on the 13th of for services contracted from Hammocks on the 12th of December 2014 to the date on which you delivered the final MSA for signature, would it be correct to say that 36 million rand would relate to but 1 day of work?
Does appear that way, Chair, yes.
But you make even a more important point, as I understand it. There certainly, as far as you know, there was no work involving Hammocks and Transnet, as far as you are aware, and none of the people that were in your negotiating team ever mentioned having had any contact with Hammocks.
That's correct, Chair.
Yeah.
Based on your experience, is there any commercial sense of these agreements and payments made?
Chair, it doesn't make any sense to me. I fail to understand what value Hammocks could have added, nor who they engaged with at Transnet, and how they could have possibly earned 36 million rand for 4 days worth of work. So it doesn't make sense.
For no work at all, as far as you are concerned.
Yes, that's true. Chair. No work at all.
Yes.
But allegedly some work.
Yes. Now, they were to get that money from Neotel, isn't it?
That appears the way they were paid, Chair, yes.
Would this mean that Neotel, in reaching an agreement with Transnet, may have taken into account the fact that they might have to pay a certain amount of money to somebody else? In other words, taking from their own money, money that would come to them anyway.
Chair, it's possible, yes, that they could have.
So the fact of the matter is simply that Transnet paid all the money that it was supposed to pay to Neotel, and then Neotel may have then taken part of that and paid it to Hammocks.
It does appear that way, Chair, yes.
Yes. To the extent that Transnet may have been satisfied that the amount agreed to between itself and Neotel was commensurate and appropriate for what the agreement related to, Transnet can't complain, can it? Couldn't complain, could it?
Chair, so we weren't entirely over the moon with the asset buyback price nor the transition fee price. But like I've tried to articulate before, we were in a position where, to be frank, if Neotel charges 250 million rand for the assets instead of 200 million, we probably would have still have paid it. So I can't comment on whether Neotel inflated that price and then used that money to pay Hammocks for this alleged service.
Yes. Well, obviously, if the amount that Neotel insisted Transnet should pay, to the extent that that was an appropriate amount, having regard to what was supposed to be done in terms of the agreement, then whatever portion of that amount they may have given to Hammocks, that's their business, isn't it?
Correct, Chair.
If one proceeds from the premise that the amount agreed to between Transnet and Neotel was an appropriate amount.
Correct, Chair.
So like if I sell you, a car and I say it's 100,000 rand, if it is worth selling that amount and you buy it for that amount, but you then give part of that to somebody else, then that's your business with the other person.
That's correct, Chair.
But the problem would arise if I have inflated the price that have said you must pay because I know I have to pay somebody else.
Correct.
And that's what you say you don't know
Correct,
anything
Chair.
about.
Because of the technicalities and the
Yes.
position Transit was in,
Yes.
we felt the prices were excessive.
Yes.
Whether they were inflated to pay Hammocks,
Yes.
I don't know and I can't comment.
Yeah, you felt they were excessive, but you were in a vulnerable position. You could not afford the consequences of not reaching agreement with Neotel.
Absolutely, Chair.
That was your difficulty.
Correct.
But if you had an alternative, you could have resisted the amount that Neotel wanted.
I believe so, Chair.
Yeah. Okay.
Chair may recall that evidence has been led before this commission by Mr. Ian Sinton. And it was in that evidence that it was shown that Hammocks was a shelf company nominated by Mr. Salim Issa to receive so-called facilitation fees, and that these fees were in fact derived from contracts awarded by Transnet to various companies.
Okay.
Chair, one additional point to mention is that we will indeed be presenting at a later stage evidence on cash flows, and particularly the analysis of that cash flows, which would also talk to the flow of funds through Hammocks as an entity, which was not really an operational company of any sorts.
Yes, yeah. But apart from that, if your evidence is correct, that there was really no stalemate in the sense that the business, as the agreement says, was lost. If one accepts that that never happened, and if one accepts that Hammocks never facilitated any agreement between Transnet and Neotel, then the question would arise, why, even if this was Hammocks money, why would it pay so much money to somebody else who didn't facilitate any agreement, isn't it?
Absolutely, Chair. It's peculiar.
And of course, if the position is that this was just a shell company, then there are more questions.
That's right.
Because you don't expect somebody to pay somebody such a lot of money for doing nothing. And in terms of the agreement, Hammocks is supposed to have become entitled to that money by virtue of having successfully facilitated the conclusion of the agreement. And you in effect say, but they couldn't have facilitated that agreement without talking to Transnet.
That's
And
what they
if
state.
they talk to Transnet, they would have to talk to the negotiators. And they never talk to the leader of at least the commercial part of the delegation. Is that right?
That's correct, Chair.
Yes. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Page 18 of your statement starts the next transaction that your evidence deals with, and that is the 2014 Cisco equipment transaction.
So, I'm sorry, just to round off. So really, your evidence in regard to this is, let somebody come here and tell us what they did, how they did the facilitation of this agreement without talking to one of the parties, actually the party that was supposed to pay the money, to Neotel. Of course, Neotel would pay to Hammocks, but to facilitate an agreement between two parties, we have got to talk to both parties.
Absolutely, Chair.
I may have missed something with regard to the other part. You were on the commercial team. The other team, do you know if they talked to them?
Chair, again, I can't state as fact. I haven't asked everyone necessarily, but I can tell you that they have not discussed or they did not engage whoever they are with Yusuf Lunat, who was the technical lead.
But they wouldn't have, that is, Hammocks wouldn't have succeeded by talking to one team from Transnet and not to both, would they?
Well, Chair, they needed the master services agreement signed.
Yeah.
And the technical stream was not in charge of that. The
Yeah,
commercial
your
stream
team wasn't signed of signing that.
That's
You had
correct.
the authority
So I had the authority to get it to finalization
Yes.
to get Mr. Molefe at the time
for
to sign it.
signing, yeah.
Yes.
But in terms of finalizing the negotiations, you had the authority.
Yes, Chair.
Once they were finalized and there was an agreement that was ready to be signed, you would then take it to Mr. Molefe, and if he was satisfied with it, he would then sign.
Correct, Chair.
Yeah, thank you. And it would make sense to facilitate, try and secure the agreement of people who don't have the authority to conclude the negotiations.
Correct, Chair.
Yeah, okay.
The 2014 Cisco equipment transaction. Please explain the background to this particular transaction to the Chair.
Chair, so we've we've briefly touched on it, but in essence, after the decision by Mr. Molefe to overturn the recommendation to award the network services tender to Neotel and him,
The decision, not the recommendation, isn't it?
yes, to the recommendation, beg your pardon, Chair. Yeah,
The decision.
Yeah, so
The one by Ms. Chetty? Or no, or it's another one?
No, it's the same one. It's the
Yeah,
same one,
okay.
Chair. So when Mr. Molefe decided to overturn that decision correctly
Yes,
by
yes.
Mrs. Chetty, that meant that we would need a network transition, and that meant that, well, so effectively we met with Cisco, Neotel, T-Systems, and Transit Management, or ICT Management, and we came to the realization that we would have to procure certain equipment that Neotel informed us was approaching end of life and end of support, and T-Systems, as part of their tender, would have included it. So we engaged with T-Systems, who removed it from their tender and the pricing as well because of that exclusivity contract with Neotel. Confirmed the pricing with Gartner that the pricing seemed fair, and followed a governance process, Chair, to get that assets acquired, which Transit would then own, which was effectively a portion of the switches and routers in the campuses. So we just fast-tracked that transaction effectively to transition the services in essence.
What was the value of equipment that you needed to procure, that Transnet needed to procure?
Chair, if I recall correctly, it's 302 million odd rand.
If I can ask you to go to bundle BB7B, page 525. It's annexure W2. Do you recognize
Did you say 525?
525? Do you recognize this memorandum dated 21 February 2014?
I do, Chair.
Who's the author of this document?
I was the author, Chair.
In paragraph 1, is it correct that the correct amount, which was the value of the equipment to be procured, was 305 million?
Chair, I think at that point we were still finalizing negotiations, but so it refers to a maximum value of 305 million rand, yes.
Thank you for the clarity. Please continue to outline the background in relation to this particular transaction.
Chair, I think I captured it in the discussion earlier that we had an exclusivity clause with Neotel, and as a result we had to procure this equipment through them. We felt that it was absolutely necessary to buy it, well, quickly, to get the transition done in a short time space.
Okay. And at page 529 of that same bundle, is it correct that your signature is dated 21/2/2014 as, and it's exactly the same for the other signatories to this document, which was recommended by Mr. Yusuf Lunat, Mr. Gary Peter, and approved by Mr. Anoj Singh on the 21st of February 2014.
That's correct. I think Mr. Singh wrote, it's a dash, it's not a 114. That's correct. 21 February 2014 by the parties.
He seems to have indicated that he signed it on the 21st of February, 114.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, all right, yes.
Did you seek advice from any external service provider in relation to this transaction?
I did, Chair. So I approached Gartner to check the logic of what we were planning, whether it made sense to them as a technical expert. We also checked the pricing with them to see, they normally have databases with pricing, just to check the relevance and how good or bad the pricing was. I think, like I mentioned, I also checked with T-Systems that should we buy these assets through Neotel, that they'll remove it from their tender pricing so that we would not have to pay for these assets twice.
Thank you. And so at page 20 of your statement, at paragraph 64, from 64.1 to 64.3, you record the advice that you were in fact given by Gartner in order to further this particular transaction.
That's correct.
What steps did you then take following receipt of such advice?
Chair, from what I can recall, I engaged further. Gartner was of the view that we could potentially get a slightly better price, although subsequent to me sending the information to Gartner, we've already reduced the price. I further engaged directly with Cisco to see if we can get that price down even further, which we could slightly, and I then, when I placed the order, as you'll see later, Chair, I requested Neotel to pass that further discount that I negotiated with Cisco on to Transnet.
And so your engagement was only with Neotel and Cisco?
That's correct.
If I can ask you to turn then to page 544.
Well, just to be 100% accurate, and T-Systems to ensure that they reduce their pricing, Chair. But yes.
Thank you. Okay. So again, bundle BB7B, page 544, which is the second last page of this bundle. There's an email that appears in the middle of this page on 21 February 2014. It appears that you had sent an email to Francois. Who is Francois?
Chair, Francois van der Merwe was the account executive from Neotel responsible for the Transnet account.
And what exactly is the purpose of this email?
Chair, the focus of the email is to confirm that Transnet would like to place the order for that equipment to the value of 302.7 million rand. There were some slight amendments made to some technicalities that Mr. Lunat requested, so I just made sure that they included that. And then I also in the email asked Mr. van der Merwe to make sure that the further discount I negotiated be included in the final pricing, or passed on to Transnet.
Thank you. Page 539 of the same bundle is an email from Hammocks to Francois van der Merwe at Neotel, titled Project at Transnet, dated February 21, February 2014, 11:46. Are you familiar with this document?
Chair, I am. It was shared with me by the investigators.
And what are your comments in relation to this document?
Well, Chair, it seems quite strange to me again that Hammocks engaged with Neotel on the day that we placed the order. So they appear to be quite good negotiators, and they get things done quickly because they engage with Neotel on the 21st, which is the same day I placed the order with Neotel. So again, I fail to understand.
But that date, the date of that email is 21 Feb 2014.
Yes, Chair.
So, Chair, it's the same date that the memorandum was approved by the four, or recommended and approved by the four signatures, mine included, and it's the same date I placed the order with Neotal.
Okay.
If I can then ask you to turn to the new supplementary bundle. The second last page, which is page 179. There appears to be an
7-9?
179. It's the second last page of the supplementary bundle, Chair.
Mine goes, oh, okay. I found it. Yes.
That appears to be an email from, again, Francois van der Merwe at Neotel on Saturday, the 22nd of February 2014, and it's sent to Hammocks, SA, with the subject title Neotel Acceptance Letter. Are you familiar with this document?
I am. The investigator shared it with me, Chair. Yeah.
And attached to this document at page 180, there appears to be an acceptance letter from Mr. Sunil Joshi of Neotel to Mr. T. Khan of Hammocks. The letter reads in the second paragraph, "We hereby confirm our acceptance in principle of the proposal on the conditions stipulated by you in paragraph 5 of the proposal, that the parties enter into a detailed written agreement pursuant to the proposal, which detailed agreement will contain the terms of the proposal and incorporate other commercial terms pertinent to transactions of this nature. The parties shall conclude such detailed agreement within 14 days of the date of the letter." The enclosing email talks specifically to an opportunity to work together regarding an opportunity uncovered by yourselves at Transnet SOC. What are your observations in relation to this email and the attachment in context?
Sure, the observation again is it's odd that I can't understand how Hammocks would have identified this opportunity at Transnet. Neotel had an exclusivity clause in their agreement, so I can only buy from Neotel. So, I mean, they were in a perfect position, so I'm not sure why or how this Hammocks identified the opportunity and how Neotel would have benefited. They could just sit back and wait. If we have to buy it, we have to buy it from them. So it's unclear what value Hammocks would have added, number one. Number two, Chair, is the date of this email is the 22nd of February 2014. You would recall all the correspondence we discussed before was dated the 21st of February, but in this letter, or in this email, Neotel states, "Please find attached the acceptance letter, and we trust we will close the business soon," when in fact the day before I've already placed the order with Neotel. So I find that strange.
Okay. If I can then ask you to turn to page, what's this now, bundle BB7B. Page 541. This appears to be a letter on a Hammocks letterhead, authored by Mr. T. Khan, dated 6 January 2014.
Yes.
This letter reads at paragraph 1 by Mr. T. Khan to Neotel, once again for the attention of Mr. Francois van der Merwe, titled Subject, Opportunity at Transnet. The first 2 paragraphs read, following our discussions, we are pleased to confirm that we are in a position to deliver on an opportunity at Transnet that we have been working on for some time. The opportunity involves replacement of network equipment for a value of approximately 315 million rand, excluding VAT. The full details of the opportunity will be disclosed to you after we have agreed on the conditions of the deal as listed below. Please help us to understand the involvement of Hammocks in the 2014 Cisco equipment agreement.
Chair, again, I, together with Yusuf Lunat, led those negotiations. And we engaged, like I mentioned before, with T-Systems, Neotel, and Cisco. Nowhere was Hammocks ever mentioned, anyone ever introduced as being from Hammocks. And again, I failed to understand how they could have identified opportunities without walking the floor, so to speak, being at Transnet, identifying it. And again, the exclusivity clause doesn't really make sense. It also mentions risk factors undertaken by us in the entire project, which I failed to understand what risk they would have encountered.
There was no risk.
No, there was no service.
A paragraph at page 21 of your statement, paragraph 69, you effectively summarize your evidence as follows. You say you did not...
What page?
Page 21 of the statement, which is exhibit BB7A.
Yes.
You effectively summarize your evidence in relation to this transaction and Hammocks' involvement in that. When you state that you had not met any person or representative from Hammocks. It remains unclear to you how Hammocks would have identified the opportunity, and they had no interaction with anyone from Transnet. And that was at least during the time period that you were there.
Correct.
The MSA between Transnet and Neotel included an exclusivity clause which presented certain restrictions. And that you were the one that in fact placed the order on the 21st of February 2014 to the value of 302.7 million rand. Yet this correspondence which details communique in relation to that same transaction after the placement of that order.
That's correct, Chair.
Can I be given just a second or two? I've been requested to ask for an indulgence of 5 to 10 minutes to address this particular aspect.
Yeah,
with
no,
this
that's
witness.
fine. Let's go back to the master service agreement. And it looks like whatever one says about it and Hammocks' involvement and payment of money applies to the Cisco transaction as well, equipment transaction. Is that right?
That's,
more or less.
That's more or less correct,
Yeah.
Chair, yes.
The master service agreement, if it were to be found as a fact that Hammocks, or let me put it this way, if the position is that Hammocks, in order to perform in terms of its agreement with Neotel, had to be in touch with somebody or some people at Transnet. That person or those people, that person would either be you, or those people would include you. You would be one of those that they would have to talk to, because you were the lead negotiator. Is that right?
That's my understanding.
That's your
yes.
understanding
Yes.
of what your role was.
Absolutely.
Without you saying, okay, we have now reached an agreement that I'm happy to take to Mr. Molefe, nothing would happen.
Correct.
Yes. So it wouldn't have made much sense for them to talk to anybody at Transnet for purposes of facilitating the negotiations, other than talking to at least you. And if they spoke to anybody higher than you, like Mr. Brian Molefe, Mr. Molefe would have had to talk to you and say, I understand that there is a stalemate or deadlock between you and Neotel. Tell me about what's happening, and then maybe overrule you on some points and say, no, go ahead and sign, or go ahead and prepare the agreement.
Correct. I suspect that should have happened.
It couldn't have worked any other way if it involved Hammocks facilitating the conclusion of an agreement between Transnet and Neotel. You had to be involved
I would
in one
support
way or
that,
another.
Jay. It would have had to be me or someone senior to me giving me an instruction
Yes,
to change the
yes.
master services agreement.
Yes, but even somebody senior to you there wouldn't have been a facilitation of the conclusion of the agreement from Transnet's side without that senior person talking to you.
That's correct, Jay.
And you say nobody talked to you along those lines.
No, Jay.
Yeah. So and that must be an indication, to say the least, apart from anything else, that certainly there was no facilitation that was carried out by Hammocks insofar as Transnet is concerned.
That's correct, Jay.
Yes. And if there was no facilitation that was carried out by Hammocks on Transnet's side, then Neotel must have known that there was no facilitation that was carried out on Transnet's side,
I would suspect so, Jay, yes.
because unless maybe Hammocks went to them and told some untruths about what Transnet might have said, but it can't be, because the only position that Neotel had, the only positions that Neotel knew to be Transnet's position were those that you conveyed to them.
Correct, Jay.
There is no other position that they could have known.
Not to my knowledge, Jay, no.
And if Neotel knew that, one, there was never any stalemate which was such that there would be no further negotiations, or which could result in anybody describing the business as lost business. If they knew that, and if they knew that there was no facilitation that was carried out by Hammocks on the part of Transnet, then in all probability there was no facilitation that Hammocks would have or could have carried out on the side of Neotel. Actually, Transnet would have been the party on whom Hammocks would have to work in order to facilitate, because the party that would have to agree to a certain price required by Neotel was Transnet.
That's correct, Jay.
Because you never asked them, you never asked Hammocks to go and negotiate on your behalf for a lower price with Neotel.
No, Jay.
So, so the only facilitation that could have happened at the request of Neotel could have been a facilitation involving Hammocks asking or seeking to persuade Transnet to go up in terms of whatever price, and that never happened.
Correct, Jay.
And therefore, there could not have been any facilitation.
That's
And
correct.
Hammocks must have known that there was no facilitation. Is your own analysis along the same lines?
That's along the same lines, Jay.
Yes. And if Hammocks knew that there was no facilitation and still entered into an agreement with Hammocks in terms of which they said there was facilitation and were going to pay 36 million rand plus VAT for that facilitation, then they were misrepresenting the situation.
In my opinion, Jay, yes.
It couldn't have been, it's difficult to see it any other way, because if they knew that there was no facilitation, but they signed an agreement that said there was a facilitation, and they paid 36 million rand plus VAT on the basis that Hammocks facilitated, that must have been a deliberate misrepresentation of facts if this analysis is correct.
I believe so, Jay.
And if they knew all of these things and nevertheless were prepared to pay, it's highly unlikely that they would have wanted to pay so much money out of an amount that was not inflated.
It's unlikely that they would have wanted to pay it out of their margins, Jay, yes. They would have
Yes.
likely passed that price on to Transnet.
Yes. Well, maybe they'll come and they'll explain all of these things, and they will show us that there's something we don't understand.
Sure.
Okay. Thank you.
Chair, I am informed by our investigation team that Hammocks in fact received about 34 million rand payment out of the 2014 Cisco equipment transaction.
Yes.
And that is evidence to be led at a later stage through the
Yes.
cash flow analysis.
Yes. No, that's fine. You asked for 5 minutes or so, is that right?
I've been asked to
5
request
minutes or 10?
10 minutes.
Eh?
10 minutes.
Okay, it's 25 past 3. We'll adjourn and resume at 25 to 4.
Thank you, Chair.
We adjourn.
All right.
Yes.
Thank you so much for the indulgence, Chair. Before we deal with two short points, it may be a prudent time to just request this witness to confirm his supplementary statement.
To confirm?
His supplementary statement, which I ought to have told you earlier.
Okay.
So Exhibit BB7, C, page 1. Do you recognize this document? I don't know if your mic is on.
I do.
Thank you. And on page 2, is that your signature that appears?
It is, Chair.
And that was in fact signed today on the 27th of May 2019.
Yes. Correct.
Is it correct that this statement merely corrects typographical errors in your original statement, in addition to attaching a copy of the signed 2014 MSA agreement?
And an email, Chair, yes.
Thank you for that addition. In that regard, then, can I ask you to turn to page 170 of this bundle? And this is a document which in fact starts on page 3 as the Master Services Agreement between Transnet SOC Limited and Neotel Pty Ltd, which was ultimately signed on the 15th of December 2014 and finally countersigned on the 19th of December 2014. At page 170, can I ask you to read paragraph 65.6 into the record, please?
Sure. Chair's paragraph 65.6 states the service provider warrants to Transnet that to the best of its knowledge and belief, neither the service provider nor any of its affiliates nor any employee of either has paid or agreed to pay any person any fee, commission, percentage, brokerage fee, gift, or any other consideration that is contingent upon or resulting from the award or execution of this agreement, save for such remuneration as is paid to bona fide employees working solely for the service provider or such affiliates or any of the service provider's subcontractors.
Thank you. And is it correct that when you turn to page 8 of this agreement, or rather of this bundle, page 8,
Is that another point, or you're still on?
just closing off
Connected
this
with
point
this.
quickly.
Okay.
On page 8, it's correct that Neotel Pty Ltd is in fact the service provider that you in the paragraph that you just referred to.
That's correct, Chair.
Was Neotel then contractually entitled to pay any monies to any third party pursuant to this transaction, according to the agreement itself?
So just repeat, please, Advocate. I missed the first portion.
Was Neotel contractually entitled to pay any monies of any nature as listed in paragraph 65.6
Not in my
in
understanding
relation
of
to
that
this
clause.
transaction?
Not according to my understanding of that clause, Chair.
So any payment then would have been in breach of this agreement.
In my reading of it, yes.
The second point relates to Mr. Francois van der Merwe. How close, Mr. Francois van der Merwe, as we understand it, was...
Oh, I'm sorry, before you move to another point, if you have regard to this clause 65.6, as at the dates of that agreement, which are 15 December 2014 and 19 December 2014, I guess the date of the agreement is the later one of the two, 19 December 2014. As at that date, had Neotel, as you understand the position, reached agreement with Hammocks?
Chair, I don't believe so. Those two agreements were signed 19th February 2015, so
Yes.
that would have been post the signature of this agreement.
Yes. So, technically, they may not have misrepresented anything in 65.6 to the extent that they were saying, as at the date of this agreement, they had, Neotel had not agreed to pay anybody any fee or commission or brokerage fee or any consideration that is contingent upon or resulting from the award or execution of this agreement. To the extent that that didn't say we will not pay, we will not agree in the future, to the extent that it was saying as at that time they had not agreed to pay anybody.
So, Chair, it doesn't really capture the timeline. It does state that is contingent upon or resulting from the award or execution of this agreement.
Yes, but look at the third line. Does it not say, well, you have to start from the beginning. Does it not say Neotel, that is the service provider, warrants to Transnet that blah, 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 blah. Neither it nor any of its affiliates or any employee has paid or has agreed to pay any person. So in other words, that seems to be, they are saying, as of now, we can warrant, we can assure you that we have not agreed to pay anybody
So,
for any commission about the success of this agreement.
so if that's the understanding, Chair, you are, I think, far more eloquent in law than I am, so
Yes.
it does look like it's at a point in time at date of signature.
Yes.
So it does
yes,
appear at this stage, yes, that they did not breach this
Yes.
contract.
Yes, of course, it wouldn't be easy for for the other part to say, promise that in the future you won't agree either, because you wouldn't think that somebody would agree to pay somebody for the successful conclusion of an agreement
It's already been
after it has been concluded.
correct, Chair.
Okay, all right.
Chair, in that regard, can I ask you, Mr. van der Westhuizen, to turn to Exhibit BB7B, page 519.
509.
519. To follow on from the Chair's point, this particular document is dated the 12th of December 2014, in terms of which Hammocks writes to Sunil Joshi, which is the very same representative of Neotel, which is the same entity that contracts with Transnet. And in terms of this letter, they reach an in-principle agreement in relation to services to be rendered on the MSA transaction and the fees to be paid for such services. Is it correct that the date of this letter precedes the MSA agreement?
It is correct.
And would it also be correct that this particular document informs the agreement that was signed on the 19th of February 2015 between Hammocks and Neotel?
I believe so, Chair.
And so in that context, the prohibition contained in the Master Services Agreement, which you read into the record, would in fact apply to the extent that there was an agreement to pay monies to a third party pursuant to the MSA transaction. Would that be a fair statement to make?
Gee, I don't know if I'm adequately skilled to answer that question, because this is an intent clearly from Hammocks to Neotel stating that it serves to confirm today's engagement, but it's not necessarily confirmation from Neotel at this stage yet.
Absolutely.
But the agreement subsequently is aligned to this letter, yes.
Yes.
Yeah, you probably need something from Neotel that reacted to this letter that indicates they accepted at least, even if the formal agreement may have been signed later. You don't have something that was a response to this, because at the end they say, please concur the above together with the success fee structure, where the latter shall become binding on Neotel. So it's that concurrence that I mean, it's from this you can see that that Neotel was engaged in discussions that were aimed at concluding an agreement with Hammocks. But until you have that last bit to say, how did they respond to this, there might just be some technicality.
I am informed that the investigators will certainly follow it up.
Yes.
They may or may not have something,
Yes.
but to the extent that they find anything, it will certainly be submitted in future evidence.
Yeah, no, that's fine. That's
Thank you,
fine.
Chair.
Thank you.
On the second point, if I may, Chair, Francois van der Merwe was working for Neotel during the time that you were at Transnet. Did you work very closely with him?
I did, Chair.
And how would you describe the working relationship between you and Mr. van der Merwe?
Chair, I would say that we had a very good relationship, strained at times, yeah, especially when the tender was overturned. But we had a good relationship. I think it's important. I also had a good relationship with the client executive from T-Systems. I think it's important in things like the 58 million and enabling you to negotiate things like that down to 50, that you do have a good relationship with your suppliers.
You will recall from the various documents that we referred to in the transaction with Hammocks and Neotel that Francois van der Merwe's name occurred on several occasions. Did Mr. van der Merwe inform you at any stage about the involvement of Hammocks or any third party for that matter
He did not, Chair.
involved in the transaction?
He did not.
And then finally, do you have any closing remarks?
I don't, Chair. I think we've...
Don't invite them.
That
Don't invite closing remarks.
I have no further questions for this witness.
Thank you very much, Mr. van der Versteysen, for coming to give evidence. If a need arises for you to be asked to come back, you will be asked to come back, and I've no doubt that you will happily come back to assist.
That's right, Chair.
Thank you. You are excused.
Chair, just one point. Following the evidence of this particular witness, it will be a question to be raised and to be considered whether or not, in line with the evidence of other witnesses like Mr. Molefe, Mr. Mohammadi, as to whether or not a parallel system was indeed at play at the time that these transactions took place. A parallel system which was augmented by the higher echelons of the organization to corroborate, or and outside particularly of the procurement process, to facilitate these transactions? That's a question that is yet to be
Yeah.
answered.
You are excused.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Uh, is it Ms. Silo who will be leading evidence tomorrow or dealing with reports? Did you know what it will be?
Correct, Chair. Advocate Mahlapi Selo will be dealing with the evidence of MNS, and that is to commence tomorrow.
The evidence of
MNS.
MNS. Oh.
Yes.
Okay, all right. Okay, well, then we didn't make arrangements about whether we should start early or not. So we'll start at 10. We'll adjourn for the day, and tomorrow we'll start at 10 o'clock in the morning.
As it
we adjourn.
pleases.